My name is Donald Trump, and I'm a big fan of Israel. And frankly, a strong prime minister is a strong Israel. And you truly have a great prime minister. In Benjamin Netanyahu, there's nobody like him.
So how is Netanyahu's top competitor responding to that? Well, in an interview with i24 News anchor Nurit Ben earlier today, Gantz took a clearly diplomatic approach to a question about Trump's support and the president's controversial statement about how American Jews are disloyal to Israel if they continue to vote for Democrats.
Well, I think that the relations between Israel and the United States have some kind of uniqueness that it doesn't really happen with others. First, we share the same values. Most of our interests are overlapping each other, and we have good relations because of the political system and the Jewish on both sides, whether in Israel or the States. The biggest strength we've ever had was that we kept the Israeli issue a bipartisanship issue from the Israeli side and from the American side, and I think that's the way it should stay, and it should not become a controversial issue from either side of the ocean, I would say.
All right, let's talk about these burning issues as we head into those Israeli national elections. Joining me now is Middle East analyst Thane Rosenbaum and Eric Mendel, director of the Middle East Political Information Network. Good to have you both with us.
Thank you, Michelle.
So, Eric, reports that Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump may enter into some kind of defense pact ahead of the national elections. Would that help Netanyahu?
Well, the first thing to realize is a defense pact is not necessarily something Israeli military people want, because that would impede their freedom of actions in case Israel unilaterally wanted to, if you will, attack Iranian nuclear facilities. However, going back to the question, which is political, the idea of America interfering in Israel's election is wrong. And just like Israel should not interfere in an American election, I really think that it's wrong that President Trump is interfering with Bibi.
You may think it's wrong, but maybe the Israeli voters like it, because President Trump does have an incredibly strong relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Under his leadership, there have been tremendous concessions, if you want to call them that, or political gifts that have been supportive of Israel and supportive of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Thane, how would Israeli voters respond to yet another gesture of goodwill from the Trump administration?
Michelle, look, they're thinking of naming a settlement for Trump in the Golan.
They already did that.
Right, and they're naming a train station in Jerusalem for Trump. I mean, he's Michael Jordan in Israel, so he's probably Israel's most favorite American. And sure, given the existential threats that Israel always faces, you're seeing now attacks on 3 different borders from West Bank and Gaza and Hezbollah. Naturally, anything that deepens the ties between a defense establishment in the United States and the IDF only would make the Israelis happy.
All right. So speaking of Israel's precarious defense situation, our anchor Nurit Ben asked the top contender for the spot of Prime Minister, the top competitor to Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, about the security situation and what he would do differently if he were to become Prime Minister. Let's watch.
I would do as much or more, but I would talk less.
By I would talk less, I'm guessing you're referring to all of the public statements. Israel is pretty known for keeping things secret over the last few years. We've seen increasingly public, including this week.
I think that ambiguity is one of our strengths. I don't think we should talk about everything. I think that our deeds need to show what is it that we are meaning. Sometimes you do need to give messages to the other side. You don't have to do it through the media. Definitely don't expose some covert activities that you may have done or you want to do.
So why are they doing it? Why is Mr. Netanyahu
I think it's a mistake.
Why is he doing it, though? I mean,
you
work closely with him.
You need to ask. I think there is some political aroma in this issue.
Eric, what do you make of those comments by Gantz? Is the Prime Minister over communicating, perhaps, with regards to his intentions? Because that's what Gantz is insinuating that there's just too much over-communication from the Israeli Defense Forces and the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, he thinks that the ambiguity that Israel had done, there's been a profound change really in the last year where we're showing, Israel is showing pictures of missile strikes, and they're showing all types of things that were never shown before, never claiming responsibility. And so the question is why? So is this for for his own benefit, or is there really something here for Israel's benefit? And he's saying that he believes not. That Israel should not be publicizing all these things. It gives nothing more than a personal political benefit there. I'm not sure which is the right answer here,
right.
But Gantz has the older approach that up until recently had worked very well.
Well, Thane, you could argue that Israel needs to control its own messaging, and this is part of that, because Israel is often misrepresented by the international community. So this is just the Israeli government, admittedly under Netanyahu, but the Israeli government trying to set the record straight.
Sure, and also I'm not so sure it's against the interest of the United States. Remember, the Pentagon might not be so pleased with Israel's involvement, say, in Iraq. But I think Donald Trump's position is, look, this is a tag team match, and I have a proxy called
But what do you
Israel.
make of Gantz's criticism of Netanyahu on this?
Well, look, Gantz has always been considered the lightweight, blander version of Netanyahu. So he needs to project something that is different. That was the take on him back in April's election. So he has to stand apart. But also it's important to remember that Gantz wants to distance himself to some degree from Trump. He wants to take the position, if the Democrats regain the White House in 2020, this isn't going to be good for Israel. I want to show the Israelis that I can work with the Democrats and that I will not be the one that a new Democratic president.
You think he's been sending that message?
I think that when he says, I want bipartisan support, I think he's implicitly saying, look what's happened to us. Because of Netanyahu, we have aligned ourselves so closely with Donald Trump that we've lost this spirit of bipartisanship. And I don't care what Trump says at this point, because all I'm saying is, I'll work with anyone who is the president of the United States.
We'll see if that message resonates with the voters. Thank you so much, Eric Mandel, Thane Rosenbaum.